Thanks, Alex. Hello, everyone. Nice to see you all this morning. For those who don't know who we are Northamptonshire Community Foundation. We are a grant-making charity, and we are one of 47 community foundations in the UK, and we promote and manage philanthropy by working with donors and ensure projects are making sustainable impact. So if you are interested in funding with us, we cover the county and we have a variety of funds open. Our contact details will be at the end of the presentation, so get in contact with us, but we'll be covering alternative sources of funding outside of NCF. Let me work out how to actually change the slide. That would be helpful. There we go. So the purpose of this webinar is to raise your awareness that NCF is just one of many sources of funding providing you and to provide you with the resources you need to research funding opportunities for your organisation. So everything in this PowerPoint will be linked and we will share the presentation with you at the end. So we will cover why look for other sources of funding, some funding tips, who your local infrastructure organisations are, your local funders, some national funders, fundraising ideas, and some resources at the end. So, why look for other sources of funding? One of the most important reasons to look for other sources of funding is to simply reduce your dependency on one organisation. When you rely too heavily on one funder, whether that's a government contract, a large foundation, or even a major donor, it creates that level of risk. If that funder's priorities shift or if their budget tightens, the organisation's sustainability can shaken. Essentially, it's like putting all your eggs in one basket. You don't want to do that. When funding comes from multiple sources, it creates more of a predictable financial basis that allows you to plan ahead rather than constantly reacting to short-term funding gaps. It also frees up leadership to focus on strategy, growth, and impact instead of being stuck in that survival mode. Ultimately, it creates more sustainability. Um, Funding is very oversubscribed. The total amount of grant funding received by the voluntary and community sector has fallen in recent years and is likely to fall further. Coupled with more organisations looking for funding, means there's much greater competition. The time it takes to submit an application and then receiving a response. So, on average, you're waiting between 2 to 6 months, depending on the fund and the scale of the grant. So, exploring and another benefit is exploring new funding opportunities often open new doors, new networks, audiences, and communities. Each source of funding can bring something slightly different to the table, not just money, but also visibility, and new relationships. So, things to consider before looking for funding, you need to outline exactly what you want to achieve and how you will do this. This can help you determine which fund is suitable for your project. So you can do this by utilising the T-GROW exercise, which is on the in the blue squares on the left. So, for example, thinking about a topic, asking yourself, what is the issue? Could this be social isolation, homelessness, well-being? Next, you will need to define your aims, how you will achieve this, and what you would need to carry out your goal. Assess where you are right now. Do you have existing staff, volunteer, resources, funds for the project? This will help you determine what you will need. Explore new possibilities, partnerships, in-kind support, such as venue, equipment, and how committed are you? You will need to allocate time to planning, creating a budget, completing the actual application, then waiting for your outcome, which can, as you probably are all aware, which can take some time, upwards of 6 months. So some tips. check that your organisation and project are eligible before you put in an application. And if you're unsure, just drop the funder an email or give them a call. Look at what they have previously funded to see whether or not your project is something that you think the funder would most likely fund. Save your application as you go. And I would go as far to say as copy and paste your application in a Word document as well, just because we can't rely on technology. Be specific in your application. So the who, what, where, when, whys, be very specific. That's always really helpful. Focus on the funder's priorities. Take advantage of application reviews. So get in contact with the funder. If they don't advertise this on their website, ask them if they offer this service well in advance of the deadline is really helpful. And most importantly, keep track of the deadlines, obviously. Next is your local infrastructure organisations, which is really important for you to know who they are as they are here to support you. They offer a wide range of support, which includes startup advice, information and guidance on how to become a social enterprise or a community interest organisation, um, a registered charity, information on governance, policies, procedures, training sessions, workshops. They can help you identify funding opportunities. Um, if you sign up to their newsletters, they're really good at keeping you up to date on new funding opportunities. So that's really helpful. You can sign up through their websites. More recently, some of the local infrastructure organisations have formed collaborations to create Aspire NN in the north of the county and then Social Action West Northamptonshire. So Aspire NN formed in late 2024, I think. And it's led by Groundwork, and it's in partnership with five other local infrastructure organisations, Volunteer Action, Support Northamptonshire, um, North Northampton Social Enterprise Network, Serve, and Northamptonshire Acre. And like I previously mentioned, they provide all of that useful things for local community groups, including capacity building, advice, funding, support, and governance. They also are very visible since they've started. So it's definitely, if you're doing work in the north, it's definitely worth connecting with them. They have monthly in-person grant finder sessions where they can help you navigate and identify funding opportunities through the database called Grant Finder. So that's really useful to go to, so you can actually sit down and have a dedicated session where you can look and spot opportunities. Similarly, in the West, there's a collaboration between South Northants Volunteer Bureau, Daventry Volunteer Centre, and Voluntary Impact Northamptonshire, where they're doing very much the same thing as a local infrastructure organisation. And they have a online VCSE engagement group, volunteer managers and coordinator network, and CEO network, which you can find through Voluntary Impact Northamptonshire's Eventbrite page. So they are definitely two to keep in mind. So before we get on to some national funders, it's really useful to know what is available to you locally. And they are well worth exploring because they are very specific to Northamptonshire. So you are competing with a smaller pool of applicants, which can increase your chances. And local funders often have a better understanding of your community needs. So starting with West Northamptonshire Council, at the moment they only have one grant open to community, which is their community transport grant for 2026 to 27, which is closing later this month. This is aimed at supporting community-led transport solutions, particularly where there's gaps in commercial transport or where transport access is a barrier to service like healthcare, education, or employment. This isn't a set maximum grant. set maximum grant amount, which makes it worth exploring if transport's even a small part of your work. And more generally, they run community funding rounds throughout the year, even if they're not always open at the same time. So it's worth keep checking their website. So previously, they've offered grants such as their Welcome in Space grant, with grants up to £1,500 to support safe, warm community spaces. They also regularly run their discretionary community funding grant, which is a more flexible pot of funding that can support projects up to £15,000 as long as they um, address a local need and clearly link to the council's strategic priorities. Next is North Northamptonshire Council. They have a main community grant fund, which is it's currently closed, but they usually run on an annual basis, and when it's open, they offer grants up to £5,000 for VCSE organisations to deliver projects that improve the life for local residents and increase community involvement. The fund can help support both revenue and small capital costs, such as equipment and minor works. And again, the application must clearly link to the council's priorities set out in their corporate plan. Next one to keep a note of is the Northamptonshire Police Fire Crime Commissioner. The Northamptonshire Police Fire and Crime Commissioner. They offer grant funding for community and voluntary organisations delivering work around community safety, crime prevention, and supporting vulnerable people. Their main put is their Safe and Sound Community Fund, which offers grants between £1,000 and £10,000. This fund is open on a rolling basis, so you can apply at any time with no fixed deadline, but their applications are still reviewed periodically, and it will close when their budget is fully allocated. And they also run a road safety community fund for grants between £500 and £5,000 to support local road safety priorities. Both schemes projects must clearly align with their commissioner's safe and sound plan. Next is Northampton Town Council's funding. I've only just included this one here, but any local town in Northamptonshire, it's worth looking if they've got available grants, but I can't go through obviously every single one. So just for an example, I'll touch on Northampton Town. So they have several grant programs aimed at supporting community-led projects that benefit the town. This includes their general community grant program, um, the councillors' community fund, and they have some themed funds such as their climate change grant and their Northampton in Bloom startup grant. Their funds range from around £200 to their large awards of £10,000, depending on the programme. And projects must demonstrate that they enhance the economy, social, or environmental well-being of Northampton. And applications are accepted throughout the year, and they have different deadlines, obviously, depending on the different programme. And they are reviewed on a quarterly basis, and they have all their deadlines advertised on their website. And then lastly, which isn't necessarily a fund, but it's worth noting, is the local lottery. So Northampton, Corby and Daventry each run a local community lottery, which allows voluntary and community organisations to set up their own fundraising page for free with no admin costs, so it's completely free. Supporters can buy a ticket through the group's page, and a proportion of each £1 ticket goes directly to that organisation. So it's a different percentage in each place, but in Northampton and Corby, it's 50% of the ticket, so that's a high amount. And in Daventry, it's 40%. I think that changes, but that's what it is right now. So that's quite an easy way to get a little bit of extra money in. So now we'll move on to look at some national funders. Some you probably will have heard of, but hopefully some you haven't. So we'll start off with some major grant makers, National Lottery, which I'm sure many of you have heard of, but it's worth it's worth having a refresh. So the National Lottery, they raise money for good causes. And people use the funding to improve lives and community. There are 12 distributors of the National Lottery funding, supporting projects that transform communities, protect heritage, and enrich lives through arts, sports, and culture. They run a range of programs, but the first we'll focus on two key ones, and the first one is the Awards for All, which is one of their most popular programs, and their grants range from £300 to £20,000, and it's open to charities, community interest companies, community and voluntary groups, health bodies, town and parish councils. The focus is community-led projects that benefit local people and is particularly well suited to smaller organisations delivering activities on a local level. Funding can be used for things like equipment, project costs, project staffing, events, venue hire, and volunteer costs. For example, a group running weekly workshops for isolated older adults. There are no fixed deadlines, but they recommend applying for around 16 weeks before your project start date. So that's worth bearing in mind if you're looking to put an application in. They also have their Heritage Fund, which supports projects helping people connect with heritage. It could be local history, nature, buildings, tradition or culture. Grants start from £10,000 and could go up to £250,000 and beyond that as a part of their separate larger programme. And depending on the scale of your project, you'll need to show how your work delivers public benefit and meaningfully involves the community with a strong focus on inclusion and environmental sustainability. A typical example might be restoring a local war memorial with volunteers in a local school involved in researching, learning, and maintaining the site. Most Heritage Fund grants are open on a rolling basis, although larger projects have an additional stage before you can submit a full application. But with all grant programs, keep checking the website for the most up-to-date guidance. The next one is the Garfield Weston Foundation, which is a family-founded grant maker that support a wide range of UK charities working across the area, such as welfare, youth, community, environment, education, health, arts, and heritage groups. They offer two main types of funding through their regular grants, which is for grants up to £100,000, and their major grants, which is up to £100,000 or more. So £100,000 or more, not up to, sorry. Applications are accepted all year round with no deadline. Regular grants are suitable for organisations and require at least 1 year of accounts, whereas major grants are intended for larger projects or organisations with either the total project cost or an annual income is 1 million or more. And these begin with an expressions of interest. The funding is very flexible and it can support capital projects, core costs and revenue needs, making it particularly valuable for organisations' sustainability. Only UK registered charities, CIOs, and housing associations are eligible to apply. So CICs, social enterprises, and local authorities, they can't apply for this fund, this grant maker. Next one is the Esme Fairbairn Foundation, which offers long-term grants starting at £30,000 with no upper limit, and they fund core projects and unrestricted work, with most grants running for 3 to 5 years. Their funding focuses on three priority areas: our natural world, a fairer future, and creative, confident communities. They fund constituted organisations doing charitable work, and applications typically need an annual income of at least £100,000. Their application process starts with an ability quiz following an expression of interest, and there is no deadline, meaning applications you can apply at any time. They are particularly interested in work that is community-led and shaped by lived experience and able to create long-term systematic change, including influence to wider policy or practice rather than just delivering short-term activity. So an example of this might include a youth-led campaign advocating for the rights of care experienced young people, a community-run farm promoting sustainable food systems and biodiversity, or an arts collective amplifying underrepresented voices in rural communities. Next is Arts Council, which is the National Development Agency for Creativity and Culture, investing public money from the government and its national lottery to support arts, museum, libraries across England. The most accessible funding route for many organisations is the National Lottery Project Grant, an open access programme offering grants between £1,000 and up to £100,000 with applications accepted year round with no fixed deadline. Project grants can support wider range of activities, including creative projects, events, exhibitions, community programmes, and organisational development, and are open to individuals, artists, charities, community groups, and cultural organisations. So I'm moving on to the next. So some themed and specialist funds, the Royal Countryside Fund, which supports community-led non-for-profit organisations which work across rural areas in the UK. And they offer grants up to £25,000 over 2 years, aimed at creating long-term resilience and sustainability. You have to be constituted and have an annual income of less than £500,000, and they focus on four key themes: keeping young people in the countryside, powering up rural communities, environmental sustainability, and building emergency resilience. And grants can be used for direct project costs, core costs, or organisational development. Projects have to start within 6 months of funding, and the most recent round runs from January to February. And the next one is Sport England. Sport England's Movement Fund, which supports projects helping people keep active, those who face barriers to participate, and grants range from £300 to £15,000. And the funding can be used for things like equipment, staffing, venue hire, or through match funding or crowdfunding. The fund is open to a wide range of constituted community groups, including sports clubs, charities, CICs, and they prioritise projects that reach people who've traditionally had fewer opportunities with physical activity, including people with disabilities, those with long-term health conditions, those on a low income, or older adults. And the next one is the BIFA Award, which provides grants to communities and environmental projects through the Landfield Community Fund. So with this one, to be eligible, your project must be located within 10 miles of a licensed landfill site or 5 miles within a significant BIFA operation, which is worth checking to see if you are, because you might be. I had a group contact us the other day and then I checked and they were, so it's worth checking. Their main grant scheme offers grants up to £75,000 for projects with a total cost under £200,000, and they support community buildings, outdoor recreational and biodiversity projects for projects that are open 104 days of the year. And it only funds capital works only. Moving on to the next one, and these are regional or Midlands focused funders. So the Clicks Art Foundation, which offers small grants of up to £2,000 to support UK-based grassroots arts projects that promote confidence, well-being, learning, inclusion, and kindness, with a strong emphasis on creating a safe, supportive space and improving access to the arts for marginalised groups. Um, so this fund projects They fund projects delivered by community groups, charities, CICs, particularly those working with people who have limited opportunities to engage in the arts. And applications can be submitted by email for this grant maker. And they have two funding rounds each year. Um, and the current one, you have to apply by the end of this month for their June cycle. And then their next one is the 31st of October. The next one is the 29th May 1961 Charitable Trust, which awards grants to UK registered charities and organisations that are exempt or sorry, I can't read my own notes, that are exempt from charity registration. While they fund work across the UK, they have a strong preference for projects that are based in the Midlands. So grants are typically between £10,000 and £50,000, and they support both capital and revenue costs. And they support a broad range of charitable purposes, including arts, education, social welfare, homelessness, youth work, and applications are accepted all year round through an online form, but you must do an eligibility quiz first. So, focusing on youth and social needs, you've got the KFC Youth Foundation, which supports grassroots organisations across the UK that empower disadvantaged young people aged between 11 and 25. And their community grant programme offers grants of £3,000 per year for 2 years, supporting projects that provide safe places, um, builds life skills, offering mentoring and improving employability. Um, and your annual income has to be below £40,000. The foundation prioritises work with young people facing challenges such as being care experienced, young parents, refugee status, homelessness, or involved in the criminal justice system. And applications follow a two-stage process, starting with an expressions of interest, followed by a short video. And the programme runs annually and it reopens in January 2027. So it's just closed, but it will reopen. Next is the four, which is a national funder offering unrestricted grants up to £45,000 over 1 to 3 years for small charities and social enterprises. Their aim is to create transformational impact. Helping organisations grow and become more sustainable. You must have an annual income below £500,000. The funding can be flexible, so it could be for core costs, strategic development, or capital needs. Successful applicants also gain access to free professional support, training workshops, and networking opportunities. They run free funding rounds each year, spring, summer, and autumn. Yeah, and we'll move on to the next one, this one isn't a grant that your organisation can apply to, but I thought I'll put it in anyway. It's more like a bursary. So it's from the Buttle UK, which provides under their chances for children grants. It provides grants to support children and young people in serious crisis, affected by financial hardship, domestic abuse, or neglect, and grants can be provided up to £2,400 per child. For things like school uniforms, laptops, bedroom furniture, essential activities, and the referral has to come from a frontline professional. That's just one to note for anyone who's working with children or young people. I just thought I'll mention that one. Last slide of national funders. So the Cloth Workers Foundation, which provides capital grants, and they that work and they prioritise disadvantaged and marginalised communities. Their funding supports buildings and refurbishments, fixtures and equipment, vehicles and digital or infrastructure projects, helping organisations improve their reach or impact and their long-term sustainability. They've got two programs, so they've got their small grants up to £15,000, or their large grants, which is over £15,000. You have to do an online eligibility quiz first, and at least 50% of your beneficiaries must fall within one or more of their foundation's priorities, which is your beneficiaries affected by things like homelessness, disability, addiction, domestic abuse, racial inequality, and so on. The Headley Foundation, which supports small UK registered charities with an annual income under 1 million, working across a broad spectrum of social needs. Their grants typically up to £5,000. They aim to support the quality of life for young people, people with disabilities, older people, or people with terminal illnesses and their carers, and especially those from disadvantaged backgrounds. They prefer to fund specific projects rather than core salaries or general running costs. And they don't support building constructions, transport or overseas works, and they community interest companies aren't eligible to apply either. Applications are acceptable through email or post for this grant funder as well. Um, the Barchester Charitable Foundation, they support older people and adults with disability or mental health conditions. And they focus on reducing loneliness by helping people stay active and connected in their local communities with small grants between £100 and £2,500, and up to £1,000 for individuals through a separate bursary scheme to fund outings and activities. Equipment and materials. They do not fund core cost salaries or venue hire, and they accept applications on a quarterly basis. The Forte, we'll go with that. The Forte Charity Foundation, formerly the Trust House Charitable Foundation, they provide grants to small and medium-sized charities tackling poverty, deprivation, and social disadvantage. They fund core costs, salaries, running costs, and project delivery costs, with a strong preference for frontline organisations working directly with people in need. Their small grants range from £2,000 to £10,000, while their major grants range from £10,000 up to £50,000. They also have some multi-year funding as well. Um, and to be eligible for funding, you must fall within the most deprived 15% of urban areas and the deprived 50% of rural areas, according to the Index of Multiple Deprivations, and applications that are accepted all year round. So that is just a little overview of some national funders. Appreciate I went through that really quick, but we'll share the slides after, and then if you have any questions, feel free to ask. But also, I'll link all of the funders' websites so you can check their websites out and familiarise yourself with any that stood out. So moving on to the next slide now, which is about fundraising. So these are ways that you can generate income without applying for funding. So first one is donations and crowdfunding. So raising money directly from the public, which you can often do online. This can be linked to fundraising activities like a sponsored run or cycling race. Um, And it can be or it can be a simple appeal or support platforms like Just Giving, GoFundMe, or local giving. So you can set up an online fundraising page and share the link through your website or social media. You can raise money for a specific project or just general unrestricted funds, which is good because it gives your organisation a bit more flexibility. And also, you can also use easy fundraising, which is, if you haven't heard of it, it's free and it's a simple way for charities and community groups and schools to raise money through everyday online shopping. It covers many shops that we all use: Amazon, Argos, eBay. And retailers donate a percentage of that purchase to your organisation. And you can boost your donation by sharing your easy fundraising link in your newsletters, social media, and when you're at events. But even getting your colleagues and volunteers to sign up to it is really helpful. Um, I was at an event a couple of months back, and someone said, um, that they use some of it to put towards their family holiday or something, which was so it works. Um, the next is PR and communications. So it's important to use the free tools that you have available to you. Um, so to reach people through general donation and appeals, have a social media presence to raise your awareness and build local support for people, and creating networks, contact the local press, radio station, podcasts, bloggers, getting your organisation's name out there that way. Um, Donors. So whilst one-time donors are naturally very important, recurring donations are the most sustainable source of income for an average nonprofit, and you could do this by building stronger relationships in a meaningful way. So follow up their donation with a thank you, share updates about how their donation has been spent. You could do this by collecting case studies, sharing updates and feedback from from your beneficiaries, and keep them in the loop, and make them feel good about the money that they've donated. Um, which is nice. Local businesses, so they have a corporate social responsibility, so taking advantage of that, seeking financial support, in-kind support such as volunteers, donations of goods, use of premises, that kind of thing. Social investment, so another option to be aware of. This is different from grants because it's repayable funding, usually in the form of a loan, but it's designed specifically for charities and community groups, and is most useful for an organisation that already has a reliable income stream, for example, from contracts, trading, room hire, or regular fundraising, and wants to grow, invest, or manage cash flow, such as refurbishing a building, buying equipment, or developing social enterprise. Unlike a traditional bank loan, a social investment is more flexible with slower repayment, lower interest rates, and funders understand the social purpose of your work as well as the need for repayment. That being said, it's not suitable for everyone. If your organisation mainly relies on short-term grants and doesn't have a predictable income, it might not be the right fit for you right now. It works best as like a mixed funding model approach. But it's useful to know about when thinking about long-term sustainability. And then lastly, another way to generate income is by making best use of the assets and skills you already have. So this might be hiring out a room or a community space, renting out the equipment you own, or charging for training, workshops, or your specialist skills that you have as an organisation. Um, so some groups also generate income by offering services to other organisations, schools, or local businesses, which can be really flexible, and also then it can feed back into your unrestricted income. Um, yes. And here are just some resources. for you, which again is linked. So when we share the slides, you can have a deeper look at these. So on the left is some funding finders, which you'll have your own opinions on what works best for you. Some you have to get grants is free to use and it's split into categories, which is quite nice. The Scouts Association is a long list of funders. It has a drop-down menu, so it's quite easy to navigate. The Funding Central is free, where your annual turnover is up to £30,000. Otherwise, the annual subscription starts from £50. And Grant Finder is it is a subscription-based database. However, if you attend one of Aspire NN's monthly drop-in session, I'm sure that you'll get to have a play around on it there, I think. And then on the right is some other useful websites that you can look at that have a general overview of support for community groups and charities on things like governance, volunteers, and funding. Um, the Benefact group have some great online webinars and they've uploaded their recording on things like writing applications, how to secure corporate funding and partnerships. They've got one on improving fundraising opportunities with AI, which sounds great. So those are just some useful things to have bookmarked. So there we are. And here is our contact details. So if you have any questions at any point, feel free to take a screenshot. And that's done. So yeah, I'll stop my